Welcome to our continuing Abeka webinar series on issues in education, specifically focusing on what has been going on with COVID the last couple weeks and what continues to be going on. My name is Cindy Quinlan. I had taught for several years at a Christian school in Virginia. I now work with Abeka as an educational consultant, and that has given me an opportunity to speak with many educators in different areas of our nation, in different areas of the world. And it lets me see how unique each Christian school is, and yet how similar. And so I think much of what we'll be discussing today are simply principles that you can then take and apply to fit your situation. And joining me today is Sarah Lefevers and Mike Smith. Mike Smith has taught for many years at Pensacola Christian Academy, has taught junior high and high school classes, although currently working with the high schoolers. Correct. Has also been a camp speaker for many summers for 8 to 12-year-olds. And I think one of his greatest strengths that the Lord has given him as an educator is just the ability to connect with his students and show them how much he cares. Sarah Lefevers has also been in education for many years. In different aspects, though. You had taught college for a number of years. You also worked in student life of the college for many years. And even though now you are dean of K-5 through 6th grade at Pensacola Christian Academy, you've always been doing the same thing. You've been trying to connect with students, whether they're 5 years old or 20 years old. And as I was asking you earlier about your current responsibilities as dean, you mentioned your goal as you work with each of your students' parents. And what is that goal?
To build a bridge of communication with that parent and with that student, with that family, knowing them by name and how to serve them best.
And I like that idea of building a bridge, because in this webinar, we're going to be focusing on how can we be keeping that student-parent connection that we've worked hard all through the year to build. And in some ways, we need now more than ever. Into that, though, I do want to welcome back some of you that were here last week and were able to join in that webinar. And just as a reminder that last week we were able to indicate that there are many resources we've tried to make available for teachers, some visual ways of interacting with your students. So those resources are out there for you. And then later on, those of you who have been able to attend this webinar, you're going to receive an email. And that email will include a link. Abeka is launching 2 Facebook pages. One of those Facebook pages will be specifically for Christian school teachers. The other will be for the Christian school principals and administrators. And many of you have reached out to us and said, what are other schools doing? What are other teachers doing? And so I hope that as you are able to join some of those Facebook pages, you're able to use those as a resource too, and share with others some ideas, what's been working for you, even just to have someone else who understands and says, I'm there. I've been. So I trust that you'll be able to join those Facebook groups. Some of you may be watching this later, not live, and you can still reach out at schools@abeka.com, and we'll be able to send you that link so you can join in on those Facebook groups. And so we are right now speaking about keeping contact with students. That's nothing new. Probably for you, I know for me, I know for others, one of the first things that we thought of as we were transitioning from the classroom to distance learning, but I'm now going to start calling it COVID learning. Because what's going on right now, it isn't homeschooling. It's not really online learning. It's not really distance learning. So as we transition to COVID learning, I think that was one thing we already hit on, was how can we reach our students? How can we keep the parents informed? But the reason this is such a key topic right now is, as we were discussing, a lot of parents, students, even teachers, they've hit a wall. And they're either in a rut, they're either overwhelmed, they're frustrated. So in many ways, this is a time to stop and reflect, what are we doing now? What do we need to keep on doing? What do we maybe need to do more? And what can we even change? Just because we've been doing this now for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, even 6 weeks, doesn't mean we can't take the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and 6 weeks and make some changes to keep in contact with our parents. And so we just wanted to encourage, particularly you educators, if you are feeling in a rut, if you are feeling overwhelmed right now, we're talking about what are some of the bigger picture things? What are some of the why we're doing what we're doing? That if we can keep that in mind, that may give us some of the motivation we need to keep going. What are some things that you think of in the bigger picture? If you were, and I know you yourself are also feeling, a little bit hitting that wall yourself, what are some things that can keep you going?
You know, as teachers, we know that whatever enthusiastic level we are at, the students are probably going to be several levels below that. And so we know that we've hit a wall. We feel like, hey, why are we really doing this right now? Spinning our wheels, so to speak. But I would just really want to encourage our teachers to dig deep, ask God to help you, and to keep up the fight. One particular story, speaking with an individual whose sister teaches at a Christian school, and he said, Mike, I believe that the gospel is being reached by more people than possibly ever before, going into more homes and being heard by more parents. And the example that he gave was, he said that his sister, one of her students' fathers, called and said, hey, listen, I've never really been that involved in my son's education. I'm not even a religious person, but I'm hearing these Bible stories and I'm hearing my son pray. He goes, and I like it because I feel as though he knows God. This is an inroad that we would probably never have otherwise had it not been for the situation that we find ourselves in.
And so that is a unique reminder that even if we're just reaching out and contacting about an arithmetic quiz that is maybe a couple days late, or just seeing how the students are doing, in the big picture, we're able to share Christ, share the gospel in some of these homes in ways that we haven't. So I think that can be one encouragement of why we're doing what we're doing. We're able to share and spread the gospel in ways that we perhaps weren't 2 months ago. I know when I was thinking, I tend to be a very work-oriented person. I am a textbook Martha, I admit it. And so sometimes I have to take a deep breath. I have to look at the bigger picture. And I was just yesterday, it came to me, Jude, where it says, of some have compassion making a difference. And as we look at not just our students, but their parents as our ministry, they've been our ministry through this school year, but now they're our ministry in a different way. And just a reminder to me, it's not just a matter of checking off, I'm doing this, I'm grading quizzes, I'm grading papers, but how can I have compassion on them? How can I minister to them? And I know, Sarah, you were talking of just ways that you have been encouraged even by your children's teachers.
Absolutely. My twins had to do their Bible verses, which is typical. They had to get a grade for their Bible verse. Their teacher called, asked them how they were doing. Okay, let's say your verses. And they said their verses. They got their 100. It was great. But then she just took it a next step further. Okay, now how can you apply those verses? What can you do today to do what the Lord has asked you to do in those verses? And then even the next week when she called them and checked up on them, she said, so what did you do? How did you apply those verses? And I thought that was so neat, how she checked up on them, she did the academic needs, but then really challenged them spiritually on top of it. I think of my daughter who's in high school, who her teacher recognized in algebra she did really well on her test, better than she did last quarter. He sent me an email saying, I am so proud of her. Sent her a text saying, good job. I thought, in all the things that he has going on in his life, he took the time to not only contact me, but contact my daughter as well. It was a huge encouragement to our family.
And then the Lord makes himself known often through other people. And I think he's allowing himself to be made known through you teachers, through you principals and administrators as you reach out. And then, Mike, I know there's a burden on your heart in many years, but also specifically this year, about what the students are facing at home.
Sure. We know that in the classroom, it's a very structured environment. It's by design. And for many of our students, that classroom is a sanctuary, away from whatever it is that awaits them at home. And while some are in a very structured environment at home, regardless of the age group that we're talking about when it comes to students, they know that things are not normal. And there may have been a little bit of excitement at first. Hey, let's have school at the kitchen table. I think everyone's hit that wall. And I think that our students, we know that as adults, we're looking for normality whenever that comes and whatever phase we find that in. But I think that's even more crucial for our students. And so for that teacher to call or to do a FaceTime with a student, for that student to see, hey, there's that caring face, that smiling face, there's that warm voice that greets me at the homeroom door each morning. If we can provide that for those students, I think that's very important as well.
And still keeping them going. And I've been able to speak with many principals even in the last couple of weeks, and many of them have shared a similar story, and that is how their Christian school was able to transfer from regular learning in the classroom to this new COVID learning much more smoothly, much more efficiently than the vast majority of the schools around them. And so now, like never before, families in the community are looking at the school and saying, wow, that's a school that has things together, that is organized. And as they see us reach out to the students, they see how teachers care. And that brings to mind the fall.
That does. We need to be forward thinking in what we're doing for future enrollments. Your interaction with that parent, with that student, could make the difference on whether they return in the fall or not. And there is great advertisement in parent-to-parent communication. Another parent asking, does your child like this school? Are they enjoying it? When a parent can say, yes, I get a great education, but on top of that, my children's teachers care about my child. That means a lot. And it is good for future enrollment to keep that in the back of your head when you're making all those parent phone calls or having all those conferences, that you are part of our marketing team.
And so I would never think of myself as a marketer. Teacher is my preferred title, but in many ways we are presenting our school like we never have before. And so I encourage some of you who are a little overwhelmed, to have hit that wall, who may be in a rut, to, as you're reaching out to parents via emails, via certain texts, that you stop and think, how might this be used to share the gospel? Or how might this be used to minister to someone else? Or even how might this be used to show others what a great place our school is? And I hope that can give you a little bit of a bigger picture. So sometimes as you feel like you're just crawling through the mud, you hold on to something to keep going. But even as we're trying to think how we can encourage ourselves, how can we keep our parents and our students engaged? And we've really included both of them here, students and parents. A lot of our focus, rightly so, as classroom teachers, is on our students, as we think, how can I keep them academically going? How can I encourage them? Parents have always played a crucial role. Both of you are parents, a crucial role in their students' education. But now that students are learning at home, I think that role has only grown. So in many ways, if you're thinking, how can I keep that student academically going, you need the parent on your side. And so as we focus, let's not just do this with students, reaching out, connecting with students, but how can we do that with parents? And I think our primary role at this point is just keep them engaged, keep them going, just as we need to be kept going. And we see that there's a significant need. You know, the Washington Post wrote about some statistics. It said about 80% of students right now are missing their classmates. It's not too surprising. Their classmates are their friends. 60% are missing their teachers. I was a little bit saddened by the difference in that statistic, but it is true that classmates don't give you homework. And then it was saying 58% they're missing their sports, their extracurricular activities. 39% are feeling lonely. And when we think about the fact that there are nearly half of the students out there that are feeling lonely and yet they're surrounded by their family, we realize as we see the word missing, and lonely, that there is a need that we have an opportunity to come in and to fill. So let me just ask you guys, as we're looking at students, how can we keep them motivated both academically and emotionally? Some of our students right now are way behind on assignments. Some of them are behind on the different things. How can we encourage them to keep on track when we're not there?
You know, I think of out of sight, out of mind. And as teachers, we inspect what we expect. And if we never checked homework, students are probably not going to say, hey, you forgot to check homework here for the last 3 weeks. I have it all here. So, you know, the word nag has a negative connotation, but I would say just calling. You've got a calendar. You know when this is due. Now, with that in mind, that we're going to be incredibly understanding of what our families are going through and be flexible with that. It's not, hey, Thursday at noon, this is due, but giving a couple of days, but just staying on top of that, giving a phone call, a text to that student. Hey, I've noticed that you have not turned in that quiz yet. Anything I can help you with? What's going on with that? I think sometimes just say, hey, my teacher noticed, okay, let me get in on this as well. And just to help them stay on track with that.
What are some things on the elementary level that we can help? If students are getting a little bit behind, how can we keep them going?
Sure. It may be that we have to pare down on some of our subjects, and we even have had to do that at the academy in some of our younger grades, because our focus needs to be on those core academic subjects: arithmetic, phonics, reading, language arts, that we have pared back on the spelling tests and the penmanship test. Now, those are important subjects, yes, but as of right now, our focus needs to be preparing them for next school year. Those subjects that build upon each other, we have got to get through the fourth quarter. And so we've had to pare back in certain grade levels on those subjects like spelling and penmanship.
And as teachers, we don't necessarily like to say, well, we'll push this to the side for now. But I think, one of the things is we need to keep adapting. Just because we've been doing this for 2 to 4 weeks, maybe even more, doesn't mean that if we have 2, 4, 6 weeks left of school, we can't start doing things differently. So some of you may be facing a vast amount of families that are behind, and you're thinking, how do I catch them up? How do I make this so it doesn't stretch out to June and July when school is supposed to end in May? And this may be a time to do triage. It may be a time to say, what skills that are they building now that they will have to know for next year? Let's focus on that. But what can we cut down? So some of you are using some ProTeach videos. You might say, well, how do I cut down on that? Well, maybe you don't require them to watch the spelling, like you were saying, or the penmanship. Now, this gives a unique situation then when we get to the older grades. Mike, you and I have both taught 7th through 12th grades, and every class is necessary. It's no longer considered not the core. But if we have so many students and families that are behind, and we know there are some things that we have to get them done, what can we maybe temporarily put to the side? How would you respond as a history teacher if some principals and administrators are considering this? If they were to say, well, right now, let's have our students focus on those skill building subjects, and let's put some of our history classes or some of our science classes to rest. How would you respond?
Well, I would cringe, and I would probably say, let's just focus on history and none of the other subjects.
And there are probably some people that would agree with you.
Sure, absolutely. I'm reminded of several years ago when the government was in shutdown, and they put on furlough a label of non-essential government workers, right? And so we're kind of thinking, well, if they're not essential, then exactly. And so I think there may be a tendency to say, well, listen, if it was okay for us to do without it during this situation, but it is apples and oranges. I appreciate what you said earlier, that this really is not homeschooling. It's not really distance learning. This is COVID-19 learning. And when someone decides to go the route of homeschooling or distance learning, well, it's something that they've decided to do. And this was thrust upon our parents. I was speaking to a parent, her name's April, and she said, Mike, she goes, I went to college to be an accountant, not a teacher here. And so I think we need to think practical here. And we can even pare down within a particular subject. In the classroom, we're very structured. We can keep the pace going. It's designed for that, but not necessarily at home. So we can scale back on some of the homework assignments. We can scale back on the number of quizzes that we would be giving, the current events in history. And going back to history, depending on the curriculum, I know that our 11th graders, U.S. history, well, they had American history in 8th grade. And it, goes into some more critical thinking level, higher level thinking in 11th grade. But we know that they did get that information, at least.
And so those are just some things to consider. If we have parents and students that are very far behind, one of the ways of motivating them is saying, let's sit down, let's work through and make something manageable, make a manageable plan. And that might include some paring down. I know I'm an English teacher, and as much as I would cringe too, perhaps some of those literature assignments wouldn't be as necessary, but we're going to keep on with the writing. So those are certainly some things to consider of helping students to stay on track. And just, I want to really quickly talk on critical thinking real quick. A lot of you're making the classes that your students are watching and learning from. Many of you are using the Abeka ProTeach videos, and so you're incorporating some critical thinking there. But critical thinking itself is a great motivator. It's very rewarding when a student takes the time to work hard and comes to a solution. So how are, just real quickly, some things that we can still incorporate critical thinking with our students, even though so often that requires more face-to-face interaction? What are some ideas?
We can ask the whys on the phone if we're tutoring a student one-on-one. We can use the platform of Zoom, and we had a teacher do this using Zoom. They are teaching area of a rectangle and had the children bring out their Legos. So it was interactive. They were still learning. She made them explain to her why they got to where they got, how they built what they built, but still getting them past the, okay, I know the formula of a rectangle. She made them apply it. She made them explain to her. And then she did it in a fun way too.
Well, I have to admit, I would enjoy the Legos opportunity. What are some ideas that you have, Mike, for how we can keep that critical thinking component?
You know, in a lot of ways, very similar. While we're not going to have the 12th graders break out their Legos.
I think we should, though.
I'm sure they have them. But really, we're doing it right now, are we not? We're answering the why. We know that we communicate, that we need to communicate, but why do we need to communicate, especially during this time? And I'm thinking of creative ways of bringing in critical thinking. Before I go to the secondary, a personal story of my daughter's teacher who called, and I've got her on speakerphone so I can hear what she's saying. And the first thing she asked her is, hey, how was your week? What did you do this week? In anything fun? And so it has nothing to do with academics. And so my daughter told her, hey, we're getting a puppy. She asked her name, and now she's helping her in language. So now all of a sudden these questions that the teacher's making up, or sentences the teacher's making up, has to do with my daughter's puppy. And now she's really interested, okay? And then you can get in those critical thinking. On the secondary, I know with my economics students, while we're certainly not doing current events per se in class, I've sent them an article about oil price, supply and demand, okay? And then we can talk about that. Just send them a quick link to that. But yeah, absolutely getting in those why questions.
And even creating, if you have a way of technologically reaching out to a number of students at a time, if you have some smaller classes, you can do this with the whole class. Perhaps in larger classes, you would divvy it up just a bit, but just spend 5 or 10 minutes and bring up one discussion question that you might have discussed in class, and do that with classmates. So, as we think of how can we motivate students academically, especially if they're behind, be flexible. It's not that we're lowering our expectations, we're adjusting our expectations. And it may be giving them a plan, which involves some paring down, and then still challenging them, reaching out, thinking about what are they seeing at home and how can I bring that into the lesson. And then real quick, just emotional motivation on a daily basis, on a class basis. I know you were sharing some ideas that you've seen, some things you've heard that teachers are doing to add some excitement to what's going on.
Kindergartners miss show and tell. They really do. The teachers miss show and tell. And so several of our kindergarten teachers are doing show and tell via Zoom, and have set times for different groups fitting in with the parent schedule to have show and tell. On the older grades, elementary grades, having themed days, even tying it in with their studies. So you're still encouraging them academically, but making it exciting for them to dress up, maybe like a scientist or a community helper or something like that. We did a video scavenger hunt in upper elementary where it asked them questions about their videos, and some were academic questions, some were fun questions like, what is Miss Amsbaugh's favorite candle? I mean, they really had to be listening to figure out what Miss Amsbaugh's favorite candle is. And so just thinking outside that box of keeping them engaged in what they're doing.
And sharing those ideas too. So you're sharing ideas, and on those Facebook groups, we're going to encourage many of you to share some ideas that are helping you to keep students as well as their parents motivated. Some of you are looking at the screen and you see, here's an example of what that video scavenger hunt looked like. And as a teacher, you might say, how would I have time to put something like that together? Well, even if you're just to listen to 3 or 4 minutes in the middle of a lesson and hear what is said and jot that down. What are some of the, what does the student get if he's the first one to finish that scavenger hunt? What are some ideas for rewards?
Sure. There could be a shout out on social media. There could be a note from the principal coming to their house, which when there are several hundred students in upper elementary, that the principal taking the time to write them a personal note, congratulating them, it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
And that makes me think, okay, that was specifically some rewards for the scavenger hunt, but other things that you could say this would be a reward. You're going to hear from the pastor. You're going to hear from the principal. You're going to hear from this teacher. So those are some ideas that we can have. What about on the secondary level? What are some things that come to mind?
First, I think of when I was in elementary, a note from the principal, Sarah, was never a good thing. Never followed up with a prize, but times have changed apparently. And I think that, Sarah, you were also talking how you know of some teachers that do lunch
Yes.
with their students, and I just think that's really neat. On the secondary level, Cindy, my heart really goes out for our seniors and everything that they are going through, or in a way not going through, right? Everything that they're missing out on. And so I'm just trying to motivate them, encourage them. I don't even know if motivation's the right motivational quote or whatever the case may be, a Bible verse, I'll send them. One time I was at the academy, and of course not many people were there, and I took a picture of the cafeteria, and I texted that picture to them right at 11:36, and I said, hey, you guys are dismissed for lunch. And so things like that, I think I've been getting some feedback from parents that said, hey, that means a lot. And sometimes just calling and saying, hey, how are you doing? I have absolutely nothing to do with academics. Some teachers could send something that says, hey, I know in my homeroom, for example, I've done the on this day in history. Okay, so the students, I don't know if they are looking forward to it each day, but hey, on this day in history, and you could send them, there are all sorts of resources out there for that. I had a teacher text a group of us teachers the other day and said, hey, don't forget Cameron's birthday is tomorrow. And so made a point to send him a text, hey, happy birthday, Cameron. I've also shared a quarantine birthday as well, and just some things like that. One other thing, again, it doesn't have to be academic. Going back to the puppy that we're getting, I texted all of my seniors a possibility of 4 names. I said, hey, vote on the name. I told them no write-in ballots. And so kind of tied this in a little bit with government. And we had some technical issues. There were some seniors who struggled with that. And at the end of the day, when we got the name settled, it was actually the name that our family chose. I said, now, how much more difficult is that going to be if we vote by mail, okay, for president of the United States? So, try to tie that in and just have fun with it.
So we focused on the students for now, but we also mentioned parents are a key person, play a key role. And parents are concerned. Some parents have lost their jobs. Some parents are furloughed. Some parents are seeing different things. So they have those struggles and responsibilities on top of some new responsibilities as they're monitoring, as they're proctoring, as they're helping their students with their schoolwork. We were talking about a Gallup poll that came out a month ago, and it said 42% of parents were concerned that there would be negative impacts on their students' education. And if that was a month ago, I think that percentage has likely only risen. And so we know that parents are concerned. We know that they have other things going on. How can we encourage them? Let's first talk about how can we encourage them with getting them to help us with motivating their students academically. What are some ideas as to, how can we help them see the relevance of what the students are still learning in the coming weeks?
I think it's such a key component of the parent and the student tied together. If the student feels just exasperated and in despair, I think that's going to carry over to mom and dad as well. And so some of the things that I've done is I've talked to our seniors and in various ways and said, hey, you really need to be here for mom and dad right now. You need to step up. On the lower grade, while we may not be asking a second grader to step up, it can be, hey, pray for mommy and daddy right now. They're going through, you don't want to paint a gloom and doom picture. I think the 12th graders, 11th graders, they kind of understand what's going on right now. We even have someone that said, hey, they email certificates to their parent, to their students, so it's another way of reaching out to them. But so when we're talking to parents and they're watching the news and going, listen, I've hit the wall, and my neighbor, their kid goes to a district school, they've shut down for the rest of the year. Why can't we do that? Well, there's a reason we go to school 4 quarters. I love sports, and 4 quarters counts, right? Sell them on the idea of really what we would do in a PTM. Now we have a captive audience. Teachers, that sometimes PTMs are not as attended as you would like, well attended. And so now you got a captive audience, and you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the skills that your child is learning in this last part of the fourth quarter is going to be very key to them going into the fall. Isn't that where we all want to be right now? It's just in the fall. But this is very important. And you can even give them some examples. Hey, this math skill right here, see how we're going to need this on the lower grades, phonics, these spelling rules. This is what they're going to be building upon. And I think if mom and dad can say, hey, this is why we're carrying on, then I think it might even be some encouragement.
So purposely not just saying, okay, parents, these are the lessons your students will be doing in the next week, or these are the topics, the chapters they will be reading, but maybe finding one or two things and say, this is what they will be learning, and this is how it will help them in the future. It can maybe help sell them on helping their students keep going. What are some other ways we can encourage parents?
Sure. Give them some ideas for summer supplements. There, in that same Gallup poll, it was 27% of parents want to go to school through the summer so that they feel better for the fall. And teachers and administrators are thinking, no, we don't want to go through the summer. But reaching out to those parents who do have a concern. That's almost a third of the parents that are concerned. Can you give them things, not to say do school all summer, but working on those foundational subjects, your phonics, your blends, your addition, subtraction, multiplication facts, items like that are going to help them feel more confident through the rest of this school year and then coming up to the fall as well. So that's what I would encourage, giving them some help, especially to those who you know are your lower student parents. Those students who are academically, they're doing just fine. They need some encouragement, but academically they're fine. But those who you know are your lower students, really reach out and help them feel more confident in what they're doing.
And so this might be an opportunity, as many teachers are looking at finishing up their school year in a couple weeks, to consider, okay, which students, if I were to say this is the area, one or two areas that they could focus on, how could I communicate that to the parents? Just as an encouraging, hey, if you are interested, this is something you could work on. Or maybe we word it a little more necessarily to say this will really help him be more successful. So we can initiate, rather than waiting for parents to come, we can initiate. And if you're a little bit hesitant of saying, well, I don't want to just email half my students and now they talk with each other and now everybody knows who's the lower performing students, maybe there's some just general suggestions we can give to the topper performing students. Everyone gets an email, but some of the students that are struggling a little bit more, make it a little more specific and maybe word it a little bit differently so we can really encourage the parents to keep on track with that. Now, Mike, you're a teacher, and so as yours girls are working at home, it's a little more natural to you, but even then you weren't their teacher. So I know some parents are frustrated saying, I didn't sign up for this. I'm not my child's teacher. How can we encourage parents at home that we are still teaching their students, that weight isn't on the parents?
Yeah, I think that we need to just be as accommodating as possible to our families. Let that parent know that, hey, you're right, you're not the teacher. We are here to help, and make yourself available. No one wants that 2 o'clock in the morning phone call. Hey, can you help my kid with algebra? Okay. But those probably are not going to happen either. But certainly we know teaching is not an 8 to 4 job anyways. It really is not now. And just make yourself available. You know, it may be that it's the 48th time you've answered a question to 48 different parents about a research paper, about how the assignments are coming in, or whatever the case may be. But when you get that 49th email, that phone call, whatever the case may be, it's the first time that parent is calling. And really, even if it's not the first time that parent's calling, if it's the 5th time that parent is calling, just to be incredibly understandable, to be careful in how we respond, even with a text message. The one-word answers, some people can read into that, or they read into it. Maybe they shouldn't. And so, hey, no, great question. I see why you would be confused on that. Let me help you out with this, and just to go above and beyond.
Be more cognizant of tone, and I think that's almost where we go from academic motivation and encouragement to some emotional. Is that we're often helping them, giving them advice outside of the realm of academics.
Yeah.
I know even as someone who's not a parent, I have often spoken with parents who are looking for parenting suggestions and advice. And so I think that's another role we can play, that as they come to us, not that we're overstepping our boundaries, but some of them are just looking for some basic parenting advice. I know you've had parents come to you. What are some things you've been able to encourage them with?
First of all, the fact that you take time and listen to their concern and offer some suggestion, not telling them how to parent, but saying, hey, this is what's worked for me. I have twins in 4th grade, and I get a 2-for-1 special. So when they're doing their addition or their subtraction, rote facts in arithmetic, they get to compete against each other. It's getting boring after 4 weeks competing against your twin. Guess what? I jump in there and I do it with them. I will be working at the kitchen table and I'll hear, Mom, it's arithmetic time. And that I know that I am there for the next 2 or 3 minutes competing against the twins. That and history. I can beat them on both.
Okay.
Health, they beat me on. But getting involved a little bit if you can. If you see that your child, no matter what age, whether it's the K4, K5, or maybe even a high schooler, I don't know. I have stopped the videos at times and told my son to go take a jog down the street and come right back. Sure. And just getting some of that anxious energy out.
And so just encouraging parents with some of those things, and with, some families, we might recommend, be very organized in your school day. That'll help your students. But then other families, we might say, it's okay to be more flexible. It's okay for the students not to start school until 2 or 3 if that's what your job requires, or if that's what different things. So being ready to personalize and give them different things, and even reaching out to them non-academically. I know you've done that where you've called some families. How has that seemed to be received? Where you just call and say, how are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe it's received incredibly well. I got an email yesterday, in fact. Hey, I've got to go in. I'm going to be in the hospital for a little bit. Can you just check on my daughter while I'm gone? And so it's just being reciprocated back and forth here. Hey, just calling to see how everything's going. You don't have to bring up academics. Anything to pray for you about, And I think what parents desire is the same thing that teenagers desire, and that is going to be a genuineness and consistency as well.
And so that kind of brings us back to where we started, where maybe you'd like to organize things, principals, administrators, you can help your teachers organize how certain teachers will call certain families, and we'll say, we're calling on behalf of the school, or we're calling on behalf of this group of teachers that teach those children, and just saying, we just want to see how you're doing. We're not checking on tests or homework or anything late. We are just seeing how you are. And so I think that can continue to show the love of Christ. That can continue to show the hope in Christ as we encourage those, and give us and remind us about that bigger picture. And so there's a lot more I know we could talk about. And again, those of you who have also had some great experience and some great suggestions, join those Facebook group pages that you're going to receive an invitation to, and share those ideas. And you can also continue to minister to others and to be an encouragement. So I appreciate those of you who have come and joined this webinar. We're not done yet. We're going to be able to get to some Q&As, but I just want to say thank you to Mike and Sarah. You have left your kids at home. You've had to be flexible yourself with some of their requirements, and so I appreciate that. And before we get to the Q&A, I just want to let those of you watching know that there will be other webinars in this series. And even next week we have coming up, we're going to talk about how to connect with your team, especially for principals and administrators, how to keep in contact with your teachers during this time. Some are able to come to the school, some are not. And then we'll even have a webinar next week on marketing your school. We talked about enrollment, that teachers contacting parents is marketing, but we also are going to look at just some basic marketing things that we can encourage schools to do with. And so at this time, we're going to transition over to our Q&A. And one of the things you may not know you're able to do is, as you see a question already written on the Q&A, you can push the thumb button, pardon my non-technological use, but you can bump it up and say, hey, I have that question too. And so we'll try to address as many of these as possible. Some of you, if your question wasn't able to be answered, or you still had more questions, please feel free to contact us at schools@abeka.com, and we'll be able to still do all we can to help you So we have a question here. Do you have any motivation tips for preschool students, primarily 2 to 4-year-olds?
Sir, I'm going to let you handle that.
Although your kids have been 2 to 4.
They have
so.
been.
I would recommend or suggest as a possibility of, instead of just sitting them down in front of a electronic device to do their schoolwork, to do it in segments. Because when you're actually in the classroom of K4, which I have been many K4 classrooms, they do their subjects 5-10 minutes at a time. They're getting up, they're taking break to the restroom, they have snack, they have recess. And so you kind of have to do the same in the home setting as well, giving them those breaks, not, okay, this is your school and it's going to be 2 hours long. I would recommend for teachers to reach out to their pre-K student parents and see what avenue the parent is comfortable with you talking to that child. They miss their students, they miss their teacher, they miss their routines. My children, very routine, and they're missing that. So what normalcy could you bring back to that child, whether it's show and tell, whether it's wear your crazy socks, take a picture and send it to me, I want to see them. Give them back some of that normalcy. And as a parent, I would say, give them breaks.
Okay.
I know that I'm a full-time working mom. My husband's a full-time worker outside the home. And sometimes it's like, I have got to get this done. Well, they're young and they need some breaks.
So that's even something teachers can communicate. Some of you can communicate that to parents to encourage them to give breaks, but also some of you may be creating some lessons, make them short, 5 to 10 minutes,
Sure.
Very short, very active. Some of the resources that we provided last week might have some images, some things that students will recognize that they saw in class that they can now see on you. So those may be some ideas for motivating, especially those littles.
Songs. They love their songs.
So singing with them, and maybe even, telling parents, you don't know this song yet, but I can teach it to you. So encouraging parents to sing with their kids. Another question says, how to bring flexibility to work with motivation when certain students are not turning in assignments. So kind of what we mentioned earlier, here we have students aren't turning in assignments. Where is the balance between flexibility, the balance between this does need to be turned in? What are some thoughts you have on that?
I think you could, as a teacher, talk to the parent, you could talk to the student and say, hey, listen, if this isn't turned in by this point, it may begin to hurt future assignments.
Okay.
And go from that.
So again, showing them the relevance that this needs to be turned in. And again, maybe later, if you realize that if I don't do something, that student is going to turn in nothing will get turned in. So maybe talk with the student and say, what can you get? And it might still impact his grade a little bit, but we'll say, well, if you can at least get this done.
Sure.
And in some ways, I haven't worked in the banking industry, but when some people are mortgaging things or they refinance, that's what happened. Okay, this is the situation we're in. Let's work out a new plan to help work it out. So that may be an idea too, to work with those students, to work with parents. What's a plan that we can make starting now that will help you get this in?
At some point, they will get so far behind that it will be insurmountable. Okay, and so like kind of what you're talking about, if it's debt, okay, bite size. Let's work on this. Let's get this in by this day, and we'll go from there.
I know we've tried some to stay in front of it in elementary by doing some. Right now we have they can send in a video of their favorite Bible story. So it's another kind of contest going, but they cannot submit it unless they're current on their academics. So there's a little bit of that motivation, probably for the younger ones, not probably so much for the high school students. But hey, I want to participate in this. This is something fun, but I can't do it unless I'm current on my studies.
Okay, so even some of those motivation ideas we were talking about earlier, using them as, you can do this once you're able to get it done. And Mike, did you have something to add? I didn't know.
Yeah, well, I was just say in regards to secondary, there may be, I believe we've touched on it, but there may be still some saying, listen, on the secondary level, I mean, just the motivation part of it. I like to be transparent in class. I like to be very real with my students and bare bone said, listen, you're going to face tougher things in life than this right now. So listen, if you can, if you're you got to overcome this, and this is just an obstacle that's in front of us, and you got to either see it as an obstacle or an opportunity, and press on.
So being honest and being
Yeah.
encouraging with them.
Yeah.
Another question, if a parent pulls a kid out of school, how will they be promoted to the next grade level? I have had two parents pull their child from the classroom and assume legally they will be promoted to the next grade level. They state that schools should understand. That is definitely something to, as a school, to talk with the administrator. And the administrator, and we mentioned some of this in last week's webinar, about what is locally as well as in the state, what are the requirements, what is being laid down, what is being expected. If the state has said nationwide all students will go to the next grade level, then there probably isn't much that your school will be able to do. But if the state hasn't said that, then your school might need to consider a policy. But again, in the spirit of connecting with teachers and parents, before you say, well, nope, your student can't do that, maybe reach out. Maybe there's more to this story than they're sharing. Maybe there's some way that we can encourage with them. But I think there's some significant legal ramifications. So do be speaking with the teacher, with the administrator, and locally as well as on a state level, what has been decreed, what has been declared. And I think that might be a way to answer that. What do you do with parents who don't understand why our school chose to use the Pro Teach videos? Because this teacher says, I love the videos. So your kids are using Pro Teach, but there may be some other parents that say, I don't like the fact that there's someone else teaching my student rather than their normal teacher. What are some things that this teacher could pass along to those parents about the benefits of using the Pro Teach videos?
There was a quick turnaround, first of all. I mean, that is a very having Pro Teach available and ready. I mean, we did not plan for COVID-19.
Right.
So the quick turnaround of keeping our kids in school was very important. And then it is the same curriculum. Having that consistency was very important. This is tried and true. It's world renowned. It is an established program, instead of trying to take a school as big as ours to have every single teacher record and send this out. So those are some of the benefits of having Pro Teach at our fingertips.
And I know that at the beginning, I believe the Abeka video teachers even sent out a video saying, hey, we are not here to replace your teachers.
Right.
And that child's teacher, I would imagine, is still available for any of the phone calls, any of the tutoring that could take place, because that teacher knows that child.
And it may be, again, thinking of how we can meet some of the individual needs of our parents is maybe that parent just needs a little bit more of that teacher's involvement. So maybe even going a little bit more beyond what you're doing with most of your other students. How can I make sure this parent knows that I'm still here? I'm still teaching them up.
And Cindy, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, it is also going to open up that teacher to, instead of preparing
Right.
and getting to some way of videoing, okay, is going to open up the time for that teacher to have time with that child and all of the other students as well in that class, that one-on-one.
You had said a key earlier in working with parents is to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe first listen to what their concerns are and be able to say, I understand those are valid concerns. And just, you may never completely win them over, but say, but let me tell you how it has been a benefit to your child. What I've been able to do now for your child that I wouldn't have been able to do.
Right.
And that might be a way to communicate to it. This, again, we're getting a little technical legal, but what would your advice be for some of the parents who are refusing to pay tuition because they are helping their students with online learning? I was actually listening to two administrators talk about this. And I think, I don't want to take away from what you might have to say, but what these administrators said, and one of them was even in charge of a group of Christian schools, they said that, let's go back. Tuition is providing a service. Now, if you were also providing room and board, and now your students are no longer doing room and board, yes, many colleges have given back that. But if you are still providing the teaching and the grading and the feedback, you are still providing that service. And so if you don't mind emailing us at schools@abeka.com, maybe that same question, I may be able to send you to where there was a 20-30 minute discussion about this by Christian educators, and just indicate that this was your question. I'll try to get that resource to you. But being able to tell parents, this is what you're paying for, and we're still providing what you're paying for. Yes, it's different, but like you said earlier, parents are not the teacher. They are the proctor, but the teachers are still teaching, grading, giving feedback. And so those may be some things just to say from a business point of view, we're still providing this service, even though it's different. What would be your advice for some places or some homes who have technical difficulties or limited internet access? I know you've probably encountered that already.
We have provided DVDs of the Abeka lessons to those families who choose not to do the internet or don't have good reception. So that is one thing that we have done. Even those who don't want to do digital testing in the junior high school level, they could do digital. Some parents have chosen not to do that. And so the parents do get a packet of information with tests in it for them to administer to their child. So we've had some in our school in the same situation, and we have come up with alternatives. We've had subjects that there's no videos for.
Yeah.
So we've had to be creative using WebEx to do videos and getting those to the parents. FaceTime lessons. I know that's how my daughter is doing violin lessons. My phone is up there on the music stand, and she's FaceTiming her violin teacher, and that is how she's taking lessons right now. Skype, another way.
Right. And perhaps even if they don't have access to Facebook or Skype, this is the time, like you said earlier, be creative, think outside of the box. Not that we're not already thinking outside the box, we're living outside the box, but maybe do some brainstorming. You know, can we, even if we have the teacher go to their yard one day a week, I know that's a little definitely outside of the box, but you know, even to condense, again, for those teachers, if they're not able to access, pick the most relevant knowledge that they would have gotten from those videos and think of how can I communicate this on a paper? How can I communicate this once a week on a quick visit? Do the bare bones with that family, but still encourage them that they'll still be able to get at least what they'll need for the next year. Here we have, what are some tips on how to keep high schoolers engaged and motivated while at home? You teach high school, you have a high schooler. What are some ideas that come to mind?
That might be something where you want to reach out to mom and dad on. You know, I know we've all been there as a teacher. I go to prep at night and I get in the recliner and just some ambient noise of the basketball game, and then, well, so much for prepping, right, at that point. So to you know, maybe not be in your room, maybe be at the kitchen table. I know that Sarah, you and I were talking earlier. There's one thing about cabin fever and there's spring fever, right? And so, you know, they want to be anywhere but there. But I don't know, maybe kind of going back to what we were talking about and what we would tell mom and dad, hey, you need this information for next year. And maybe structure your environment. You know, don't be watching it on the laptop, on your phone, in your bed, okay? I know the idea of, all right, school in our pajamas, okay, but there's something about just getting up, getting dressed, and okay, now I'm ready for the day, even if I'm still in my room at a desk. So just little things like that may help.
I know that my high schooler gets distracted by the twins saying their presidents by song, their spelling words. They have a song for everything, and it's distracting. So she has her own space upstairs in the guest bedroom. And I know this might sound extremely silly, but it got her motivated, is she got to decorate that little corner the way she wanted to. And it is her space for her learning, apart from mom in the dining room doing work, the twins in the living room on the big screen singing their presidents. And she has her space to stay focused. And it's her space. That is what has helped in our family personally.
So I like what both of you said. This is what worked for my child. And you mentioned reach out to the parents. Talk to the parents. Find out what motivates that child. What can you use as a carrot? Even if normally we wouldn't use something as a carrot, now is the time for carrots, COVID carrots. So what motivates that child? And what can we talk with him and say, if you do this, this is your reward. I was talking to even just a normal homeschooler. She would never let her students, her children, go more than 2 hours without a break. They would do 2 hours and then there would be snack time, and they would do 2 hours and then there'd be lunchtime, and then they'd do 2 hours and then there'd be snack time, and the little ones would take a nap. So like we were saying earlier, even though these are older students, only let them work a certain amount of time and then give them a break. That might be motivation, or figuring out, if you get all this done by 2 o'clock today, then you get to do this tonight. But talk to the parents. What does motivate that child? And then secondly, you can build up concentration. Set a timer for 20 minutes. Can you do this straight for 20 minutes? Okay, tomorrow, can you do it straight for 25 minutes? So sometimes just building up their endurance too of getting in. And so I know we're getting close to the end of our webinar. Let me see if we can answer a couple more questions. Again, if we're not able to answer your questions, please reach out at schools@abeka.com and we will be glad to help you. And again, you know, a lot of you are looking for ideas. Take advantage of those Facebook group pages and you'll be able to continue to hear more ideas. I think nobody steals more than a teacher. We love ideas,
Sure.
And it's the wise way to do it. Don't reinvent the wheel. This person says, what are some suggestions for grading for the fourth quarter? And we kind of mentioned this in last week's webinar, that there's no right answer. Mike, I'm looking at your face going, yeah, there's no right answer. So one of the things that was mentioned by Micah in last week's webinar was talk to the parents. Get some feedback from the parents, not just maybe the teachers in your school, but I think we've seen when there's no grading for the fourth quarter, student motivation definitely dips because they realize it doesn't matter. So whether it's maybe a pass-fail grade, whether it's you know, looking at limiting the quizzes or the tests, maybe grading projects, what are some things that come to mind of how to be flexible?
I know in lower elementary, K-5, we have 6 6-week grading periods.
Okay.
The 5th 6-week grading period, we only had a few grades. I mean, it wasn't a good snapshot of the child's ability. And so we have taken, and this might not work for your school, but we have combined the 5th and 6th 6-week grading periods to make it one.
Okay.
So that we have a better picture of the child's ability. Now you get to 4th through 12th grade, it's by quarters, and so obviously that wouldn't work, but at least for K-5 through 2nd, through 3rd, we have that chance to do that.
I like what you said. This gives a snapshot. So maybe even as we're being flexible with maybe only grading certain assignments, maybe with creating a project that we wouldn't have otherwise incorporated, whatever it is, that it is an accurate snapshot, that it does show what the student can know. Anything to add?
No, I think that's great. And I think that as a private school, while still meeting all state standards, and we've used this phrase a lot, outside the box, I don't even know where the box is anymore, but that you can, you know, just like Sarah said, with the combining those quarters, that might be something that you can do.
Okay. And then this person says, I have a class I have to teach, but what are some other resources? You know, how can we access the webinar that we've mentioned, or this webinar? And again, you'll be able to receive a follow-up email, those of you that have come, and it'll have a link that you can go to, and you can access previous webinars. You can sign up for some future webinars as well. And then I'm just going to end real quick with what are other resources that we might recommend? And I know this is a very general question, academically, emotionally, but I guess in a way, before we sign off, what are just some last minute thoughts that you would say, you know, if I had to leave you with one thing or one suggestion, this is what it would be?
I would say finish strong.
Okay.
We are close to the end. We're not there yet, but we are close. And so resources would be, you know, things like this webinar. Reach out to fellow teachers, get on this Facebook group and ask for other ideas. There's nothing wrong with asking for more ideas. I've had at least a dozen PCA teachers reach out to me this week saying, hey, do you have any ideas to help? Or even sometimes it's academically, sometimes it's just, how do I encourage? So build that community around you of looking for other people ideas, stealing other people's ideas to help best get your student and your parents to the finish line.
Last words, Mike?
If you're dealing with a student one-on-one, if it's in a Zoom session, think what would be exciting in my class? What could I bring to the classroom that would enhance it? And you simply bring it to the Zoom session. It may be in a different format. I can remember Dr. Shoemaker one time saying that the overhead projector is nothing more than what the chalkboard was. Okay, it's just a different format. It does not replace the teacher. You are the teacher. You are the one that they are coming to for direction. And I think we've talked about some things that the elementary students have done, teachers have done, that you still try to enhance that, even if it's just a one-on-one conversation.
And so just thinking, what can they're at home, what can I bring either here or what can I reference at home?
Yeah.
And so again, we look forward to seeing some of you on those Facebook groups. We look forward to seeing some of you in future webinars, and just know that as Christian educators, speaking to other Christian educators, we are upholding you in prayer. Even as we pray for our students and our teachers and our parents, we are aware that there are those around the world. So I trust that the Lord will continue to encourage you, probably through other people, and just certainly through his word. Thank you for joining us.